Welcome to HFY Sci-Fi Love and War Story, where each tale takes you deeper into a galaxy full of secrets, danger, and incredible choices that not only define individuals but also shape the fate of entire species. If you're captivated by stories of bravery, betrayal, and the bonds that shape our destinies, you've come to the right place. Don't forget to subscribe and join the journey. In a distant galaxy, where pride, honor, and survival are paramount, Princess Valeri of the Cyra people finds herself at a crossroads. Her once proud and mighty race is on the brink of extinction, and the only solution proposed by her people's council is an unimaginable one: breeding with humans. Valeri, a fierce warrior, refuses to surrender to such an unthinkable fate. But when her quest for a solution leads her to the far reaches of space, she not only discovers the power of trust but also the strength of unity with an unlikely ally, Captain Daniel Hayes. What follows is a journey where survival is no longer about bloodline, but a choice that will change the destiny of both species. The chamber of the High Council was silent, the heavy air thick with the weight of the decision to come. Ancient stone columns, veined with glowing veins of blue light, soared to the high ceiling, casting long, deep shadows. The room was dimly lit, the ethereal glow from the luminescent plants outside the palace windows casting an eerie, otherworldly hue over the gathered figures. At the far end of the room, the towering, imposing throne of the council gleamed like the heart of an ancient beast, its surface carved with intricate patterns that pulsed with energy. Princess Valeri stood tall, her armored form glowing faintly in the dimness. Her armor, crafted from the finest metals of her home world, glinted with a deadly sharpness. Her piercing eyes, sharp like the blades she had wielded in countless battles, burned with a mix of anger and pride. Every inch of her was a testament to her fierce heritage, the Cyra, a warrior race known for their strength, honor, and relentless determination. Before her, the High Council sat in their raised thrones, their robes flowing like shadows, their faces hidden in the folds of their hoods. Only their glowing eyes pierced the darkness, unsettling and cold. The eldest counselor, an ancient being with a voice that could shake mountains, spoke first. His tone was heavy, filled with a sense of finality that made the room seem smaller, suffocating. Council Elder. The time has come, Princess Valeri. The survival of the Cyra hangs by a thread. Our people, our bloodline, is dying. We must find a way to restore what has been lost. The humans, their DNA is compatible with ours. It is the only solution that remains. Valeri, voice trembling with defiance. I will not be the one to carry a human child. We have fought for centuries to remain pure, to honor our ancestors and our bloodline. How dare you ask me to degrade myself for survival? Her voice echoed through the chamber, sharp and furious, as if she were slashing at the very air itself. Her words, filled with the weight of countless battles, left a silence that seemed to stretch on endlessly. The walls of the room seemed to pulse with the tension, as if even the stones themselves could feel the conflict unfolding. The eldest counselor's gaze never wavered, his eyes cold and calculating. The sharpness of his gaze cut through Valeri like a blade, and she could feel the pressure mounting around her, the weight of generations pushing down upon her shoulders. Council Elder, calmly but with authority. You have no choice, Princess. The Cyra's future is at stake. This is our only chance to survive. You are one of the few left of our bloodline, and you must do what is necessary. Valeri's heart clenched, her chest rising and falling with each breath. Her fists tightened, claws digging into the palms of her hands. She could hear the voice of every fallen warrior, every lost soul who had fought for their honor. They were all watching her now, demanding she fight not for herself, but for the very survival of their species. But this was too much. It was a fate worse than death. Valeri, whispering, voice full of disgust. No, I refuse. You ask too much of me. I cannot and will not allow this to happen. Her words rang out like a challenge, a refusal that seemed to echo against the very stones of the room. The silence that followed was heavy, thick with the tension of ancient bloodlines, pride, and the desperate, clawing need for survival. The High Council remained unmoved. The eldest counselor raised his hand, his fingers trembling with the weight of centuries of wisdom and sorrow. Council Elder, coldly. We have tried everything else, Princess. Our warriors fall, unable to reproduce. Our people wither. The human race is the last hope we have. You must do this. For the sake of your people, and your honor. Valeri's heart pounded in her chest as she stepped back, her body trembling with fury and despair. The room around her seemed to close in, the walls pressing in on her with a suffocating weight. Valeri, voice rising in defiance. No, I will not dishonor myself like this. I have fought for the honor of the Cyra my entire life, and I will not surrender that honor for the sake of survival. If we are to die, then we will die with our pride intact. With that, she turned on her heel and stormed out of the chamber, her sharp boots echoing loudly against the cold, stone floor. The doors behind her slammed shut, leaving the High Council in their dim chamber, the faint glow of their eyes the only light in the silence. As Valeri walked through the darkened halls of the palace, her mind raced. She could feel the heat of her anger like a furnace burning inside her chest. The weight of the decision, the responsibility of her people, hung heavy on her shoulders. But her pride, her very essence as a warrior, was at stake. Could she really accept this fate? Was there no other way to save her people? Her footsteps echoed in the corridors, and as she neared the royal landing platform, her resolve began to solidify. She would not surrender to this fate. There had to be another way, a way that did not involve this humiliating sacrifice. The camera follows her as she walks toward her starship, the doors of the ship hissing open in front of her. The distant stars shine, cold and indifferent, beyond the ship's sleek, metallic hull. She takes one last look at her home world, her heart heavy with the burden of the decision she has just made. Valeri stood on the observation deck of her personal starship, staring out into the inky void of space. The view was mesmerizing, yet unsettling. Streaks of distant stars blinked like cold, indifferent eyes, watching her as she sailed deeper into the unknown. Her ship, sleek and angular, hummed quietly beneath her, a silent companion on her journey. But the calm exterior couldn't match the turmoil inside her heart. The engine of the starship purred as the navigation systems locked into place. Her course was set, a human colony on the far side of the galaxy, far from the reach of her people's control. The Cyra would never find her there, or so she hoped. The ship's interior was dimly lit, with soft lights casting faint shadows on the polished metal surfaces. Valeri's fingers brushed against the control panel, her sharp claws leaving faint indentations in the smooth surface. Her mind was as conflicted as her hands. She had spent her life fighting, leading her people through battle after battle, and now she was running, leaving behind everything she had ever known. I will not let my people die, but I will not sacrifice myself either. There must be another way. Her voice echoed in her mind, each word a struggle against the growing panic that gnawed at the edges of her thoughts. The idea of mingling her bloodline with that of humans was a bitter pill she could barely bring herself to swallow. The Cyra had always viewed themselves as superior, proud, fierce, untouchable. The thought of breeding with a race they had long seen as primitive was beyond comprehension. Yet, the future of her species hung in the balance, and she was desperate to find an answer. The ship's artificial gravity thrummed beneath her feet, a constant reminder that she was now utterly alone in this vast, uncharted expanse. Valeri's mind raced as the ship accelerated, the stars stretching out in long lines around her. Each light year took her further from home, and with each passing moment, the weight of her choice pressed harder against her chest. The sound of the ship's engine deepened, the vibration in the floor growing more pronounced as it pushed faster into the void. Yet, no matter how far she traveled, her doubts followed like shadows. Was this truly the only way to save her people? Could she trust humans, a species so different from her own? The darkness outside was endless, suffocating, but it offered her a strange sense of freedom. No matter what lay ahead, it was a choice she had made for herself, even if it was one she never thought she'd have to make. She had to find a solution that didn't involve humans, but time was running out, and the Cyra's future rested on fragile shoulders her own. The calm of deep space was shattered in an instant. A sudden jolt sent Valeri sprawling forward against the ship's console. The blaring sound of alarms filled the cabin, and her heart skipped a beat. Her sharp eyes darted to the control panel. An array of flashing red lights and warning symbols greeted her. Her ship was under attack. She gripped the console, pulling herself upright. Her heart pounded as she glanced at the view screen. In the distance, an unidentified ship, sleek and shadowed, appeared from the void, its hull barely visible against the backdrop of stars. But it was its weapons that caught her attention. An unmistakable barrage of laser fire streaked through the darkness, the brilliant white light illuminating the cold expanse like lightning in the night sky. Who were these attackers? Valeri's thoughts raced as the ship rocked violently once again. Her hands flew over the controls, trying to compensate for the damage, but the ship was already losing stability. The engines sputtered, and the hull groaned under the strain of the assault. She struggled to regain control, but it was no use. The warning systems blared louder, urging her to abandon ship, but Valeri would never surrender so easily. She fought with every ounce of strength in her limbs, attempting to course-correct the spiraling ship. Her heart raced in her chest as the ship began to plummet toward the surface of a nearby planet. The air was thick and hostile, and the atmosphere outside shimmered ominously. In the distance, she could see the outline of a vast, mountainous terrain, her only hope for survival. But it was a distant, fleeting hope. The crash was inevitable. With a deafening screech of metal, her ship hit the surface with a bone-jarring impact. The force of the crash sent her hurtling forward into the control panel. Everything went black. When Valeri regained consciousness, the world around her was a blur of smoke and sparks. Her head throbbed with a dull, pulsing ache, and the metallic taste of blood lingered in her mouth. She shook herself awake, her body screaming in protest, but she ignored the pain. There was no time to waste. The control room was a mess: overturned consoles, shattered screens, and sparks jumping from broken wires. The ship's emergency lights flickered weakly, casting an eerie, red glow over the wreckage. She staggered to her feet, her warrior instincts kicking in, ignoring the dizziness that clouded her vision. She moved quickly through the wrecked corridors of her ship, knowing that if she stayed here too long, she would become a sitting target for whoever had attacked her. But as she approached the hatch, a loud hiss sounded, and the doors slid open, revealing a small group of human soldiers. They were dressed in sleek, dark uniforms, their weapons drawn, their eyes focused with cold precision. Daniel, commanding. "Stay where you are, alien. You're not going anywhere." Valeri's instincts flared. She was a warrior, trained to fight and survive, and no one would capture her without a fight. Her hand instinctively went to her side, where her blade always rested, but before she could draw it, a soldier stepped forward with a swift movement. In an instant, Valeri felt the sharp pressure of cold metal against her wrist. The grip was strong, almost impossibly strong, and it was all she could do to stop herself from retaliating. She hissed through clenched teeth, her sharp gaze fixed on the man who had restrained her. He was tall, with dark hair and a scar that ran down the side of his face. His eyes, however, were what caught her attention. There was no fear in them. No hesitation. Only calm, calculated determination. Valeri glared at him, sensing something different in his gaze. This man, Captain Daniel Hayes, did not view her as a mere prisoner. No, there was something in the way he regarded her that suggested a deeper understanding, a connection, perhaps. Her mind raced, but she couldn't allow herself to be distracted by thoughts of humanity just yet. She needed answers. She needed to escape. With a flick of his wrist, Daniel motioned for the other soldiers to stand down, but his eyes never left hers. "Daniel, commanding. We're not here to harm you, alien. You're coming with us." Valeri felt the cold weight of her weapon being taken from her. For a moment, she considered fighting back, but something about the way Daniel stood there, unwavering and calm, told her this wouldn't be like the other encounters she had endured. And so, for the first time in her life, Valeri, princess of the Cyra, felt the cold sting of uncertainty. Would this man, this human, be her enemy, or perhaps something else? She snarled, her sharp teeth flashing in the dim light of the ship, but there was no fight in her now. She was too exhausted, too confused, and for the first time, she was unsure of what to do next. As the soldiers began to escort her away from the wreckage, Valeri couldn't help but wonder what awaited her in this strange, alien world. Would the humans be her salvation or her downfall? The room was small, almost suffocating, the walls pressing in from all sides. The air inside was thick with tension, as though the very atmosphere itself could feel the weight of the decision Valeri had made. The walls, constructed from metal and reinforced with thick, dark panels, seemed to hum with the residual energy of the ship's previous battle. A single, dim light flickered above her, casting long shadows across the room. The floor was cold, unforgiving, and barren, save for the simple cot in the corner. The metal door stood solid and unyielding, locking her in with the uncertainty of what was to come. Valeri stood in the center of the room, her back straight and her eyes narrowed. Her breath came in steady, controlled waves as she refused to show weakness, despite the fact that her body ached from the crash. The soft clang of her boots against the metal floor was the only sound that broke the silence, the harsh, mechanical rhythm of her steps echoing in the confined space. The weight of the ship's crash still pressed down on her, but her mind was elsewhere, racing through thoughts and possibilities. She was trapped, but the plan was still in her control. Or so she hoped. Her thoughts swirled with 1,000 questions. Why did they capture me? What do they want? Her heart thudded painfully in her chest. She couldn't afford to let her guard down. She had to remain strong, she had to resist. Her people were counting on her. The image of her ancestors, their fierce warriors, the pride of the Cyra flashed through her mind. She couldn't give in. The door to the room creaked open, and Valeri's sharp eyes immediately snapped to the figure that stepped inside. The man, Captain Daniel Hayes, was calm, his presence almost too serene for someone in her position. His gaze was steady, not filled with the fear and disgust that she had expected from humans, but something different, something more observant, even curious. He stepped inside without hesitation, his boots making soft thuds against the metal floor, the sound echoing like a slow drum beat in the silence between them. His dark eyes held no malice, only calculation. And there, in the way he looked at her, Valeri felt something stir inside her, a flicker of uncertainty, one that she quickly squashed. Daniel, calmly, with a slight tilt of his head. Why did you come here? What are you running from? His voice was steady, almost soft, but the question hung heavy in the air. Valeri stood tall, her posture unwavering. She would not let him see her fear, not now, not after everything she had fought for. Valeri, coldly, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. I came to save my people, but I won't do it by mixing our blood with yours. Her words were sharp, full of defiance. The room seemed to hold its breath as the two of them stood locked in a silent battle of wills. Daniel's gaze didn't waver. He studied her, his expression unreadable but not hostile. There was no judgment in his eyes, only a quiet understanding that she couldn't yet grasp. Valeri felt something stir inside her, a fleeting sensation of vulnerability, but she quickly hardened herself against it. She was the princess of the Cyra. She was a warrior. And warriors did not show weakness. Daniel, after a long pause, his voice gentle but firm. I understand why you resist. But there might be another way to help your people without the price your leaders demand. The words hit her like a shockwave. Valeri's chest tightened as she processed them, her heart racing. Her mind struggled to catch up with what he had just said. Another way? Her eyes narrowed, her posture tensing as she regarded him more closely. Could there truly be another way? Valeri, her voice shaking ever so slightly with disbelief. Is it possible? For the first time, Valeri allowed herself to feel a flicker of hope, a dangerous thing for a warrior to feel, but one she couldn't suppress. Was it truly possible that there could be another way, a solution that didn't require her to sacrifice everything? Was there a way to save her people without compromising her identity? Daniel nodded, his expression softening as he saw the uncertainty in her eyes. Daniel, his voice steady, filled with quiet confidence. I'm trained in medicine and technology. Maybe there's a solution we can find together, without the need for what they're asking. His words, so simple, so practical, felt like a lifeline. Valeri felt a surge of something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. It was a fragile thing, fleeting and easily broken, but it was enough to make her hesitate, to reconsider. The silence between them stretched for a long moment. Valeri's heart pounded in her chest, the idea of another solution, another way to save her people, growing inside her like a seed of possibility. Valeri, her voice softer, hesitant. What do you mean? What could we possibly do? Daniel took a step closer, his expression more earnest now, the weight of his words clear. Daniel, we don't have to follow the path your leaders have set for you. I've seen things, learned things that could help. Medicine, technology, there's a chance. We might be able to find something that can save your people without forcing you to give up everything. Valeri looked at him, her mind racing, the walls of her pride crumbling just a little. Could she trust him? Could she allow herself to believe in a solution that didn't involve the humiliating union the High Council had decreed? She had always been alone in her decisions, always fought alone, but now, there was someone offering her a different path. It felt strange to even consider it, but for the first time, she allowed herself to entertain the thought. Her voice was quiet, filled with a mixture of hope and disbelief. Valeri. Maybe we can find a way. But how? How do we even begin? Daniel's eyes softened as he took another step toward her, the seriousness of his words hanging in the air. Daniel. We start by trusting each other. And we work together. I don't expect you to trust me yet, but I promise, I won't lead you astray." Valeri studied him, her sharp gaze cutting through the uncertainty that clouded her thoughts. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, and for the first time, she found herself wondering if maybe, just maybe, there was a way forward that didn't involve her personal sacrifice. But it was a fragile hope, a hope she would protect, but only just enough to keep moving forward. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her decision hanging in the air. Valeri, nodding slowly. "Then we'll find this solution together. For the sake of my people, I will consider it. But I warn you, I will not compromise on my honor." Daniel's expression softened into a small, reassuring smile. "Daniel. Neither will I." The air in the camp was thick with tension, the usual hum of quiet activity now replaced with a sense of alertness. The soldiers moved with purpose, their eyes scanning the horizon with a mixture of determination and wariness. In the distance, the ground trembled faintly, a subtle vibration that Valeri, with her finely tuned instincts, immediately recognized. It wasn't just the rumble of shifting terrain, it was the unmistakable sound of a growing threat. The once serene surroundings of the base had turned ominous. The earth beneath their feet seemed to pulse with a low, unsettling hum, as if the very planet itself was preparing for the storm ahead. The sky, once a clear canvas of darkening twilight, was now filled with rolling, bruised clouds that blocked out the stars, casting the world in an unnatural shadow. Valeri's sharp eyes narrowed as she stepped forward, instinctively moving towards the soldiers who had begun to assemble at the camp's perimeter. She felt the familiar surge of adrenaline course through her veins, the same feeling she had experienced countless times on the battlefield. But now, something was different. This wasn't just another enemy. These creatures, the ones that had plagued her people for years, were something far worse. Daniel stood nearby, his expression grim as he looked toward the edge of the forest. The soldiers around him were readying their weapons, their movements swift and practiced, but there was an air of uncertainty in their actions. They weren't used to dealing with the same kind of threats Valeri had faced. And yet, despite the tension, there was a quiet resolve in Daniel's eyes. He knew what was coming, and he knew they would have to face it together. "Daniel," to Valeri, his voice steady but firm. "We need to stick together now. This fight isn't just about your people or mine. It's about all of us." Valeri nodded, her body already shifting into the familiar stance of a warrior. Her pulse quickened, and every fiber of her being sharpened as she surveyed the surroundings, her senses attuned to every movement. She wasn't just a princess anymore, not in this moment. She was a fighter, a survivor. The thought that she had once been forced into a role she never chose felt so distant now. Her hands, steady and sure, gripped the hilt of her weapon, the weight of it familiar and comforting. She turned to Daniel, her eyes meeting his. The unspoken bond between them was clear. There was no turning back now. She didn't have to explain her decision. The warrior in her had already made it. "Valeri," her voice low but resolute. "Then we fight. Together." As she joined the human soldiers at the front, the ground beneath them seemed to shift again, this time more pronounced. The low rumble grew louder, the very earth vibrating beneath their feet like a warning. Valeri's heart quickened, and she felt the unmistakable presence of the creatures approaching, their heavy footsteps echoing through the dense forest ahead. From the trees, emerging slowly at first, came a shape massive, hulking, and menacing. The creatures were like nothing Valeri had ever encountered before. Towering, armored beings, with jagged spines running down their backs, glowing red eyes piercing the dim light, they moved with a terrifying, predatory grace. Their thick, plated armor clinked with each step, and their long, clawed hands flexed menacingly as they advanced, their growls echoing through the air. This was no ordinary enemy. These were the same beasts that had decimated entire villages on her home world. The soldiers braced themselves, their weapons raised, but it was clear they had no idea what to expect. Valeri stood shoulder to shoulder with them, her eyes narrowed, her body poised for action. She could feel the weight of her ancestors' expectations on her shoulders. Her people had fought these creatures for generations, and now it was her turn to lead. The first shot rang out, a blinding flash of light that streaked across the darkening sky. A blaster bolt hit one of the creatures square in the chest, but the impact barely slowed it down. With a feral growl, it lunged forward, its massive claws slashing through the air. The soldiers fired again, but the creature's thick hide absorbed the blasts with alarming resilience. Valeri was already in motion, her body flowing with the familiar rhythm of combat. She was a blur of motion, leaping, twisting, and striking with a precision that could only come from years of training. Her blade flashed, cutting through the air with deadly accuracy as she met the creatures head-on. Each strike was calculated, each movement a fluid dance of violence. The air around them was thick with the acrid scent of burned metal and the sound of blaster fire. The soldiers fought with grit, but Valeri moved with a practiced fluidity that set her apart. Her every move seemed to anticipate the enemy's next attack, her warrior instincts guiding her through the chaos. She ducked beneath a swipe of a creature's claw, her body twisting to strike at the vulnerable spot beneath its arm. The creature howled in pain, stumbling back as Valeri delivered a swift, decisive blow to its head. Daniel, to himself, watching Valeri in awe. She's not just a princess. She's a warrior. Daniel's eyes remained locked on Valeri as she fought with an intensity that he hadn't expected from someone who had spent her life in royal courts. She moved with the grace of a seasoned fighter, her blade flashing in the dim light, cutting through the thick air like a whisper. He could see the strength in her, the kind that came not just from physical power, but from a fierce determination to protect her people. The battle raged on, the sounds of the clash reverberating through the air. Blaster shots echoed, and the ground trembled beneath the force of the creature's charge. Valeri fought like a force of nature, each movement calculated and ruthless. She was no longer just a leader or a princess, she was the embodiment of everything the Cyra had ever stood for: strength, honor, and an unyielding will to survive. But despite her prowess, the battle was not easy. The creatures fought with a relentless fury, their brute strength and ferocity testing the limits of the human soldier's resolve. Valeri's heart raced as she continued to fight, her every movement a calculated risk. Sweat dripped from her brow, her breath coming in ragged gasps, but she pushed forward, never faltering. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the creatures began to retreat. The soldiers, their weapons still raised, stood ready, watching the remaining beasts vanish back into the shadows of the forest. The ground was littered with the bodies of the fallen, both human and alien, but Valeri remained standing, her body covered in dirt and sweat, her chest heaving with the exertion of battle. As the last of the creatures disappeared into the darkness, the tension in the air began to fade. The soldiers, though exhausted, gathered their strength and began to regroup. Valeri stood among them, her eyes scanning the battlefield, her breath coming in slow, controlled gasps. She had fought not just for herself, but for all of them. Daniel, approaching her, his voice low with respect. "You did it. You fought like no one else." Valeri's eyes softened for a moment, the weight of the battle lifting just enough for her to process the victory. It was a feeling she hadn't experienced in a long time, a sense of accomplishment. For the first time, she realized that she wasn't alone in this fight. Valeri, nodding, a quiet smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "We fought together." And in that moment, Valeri knew that this battle was just the beginning. The war for her people's survival would be long, but with allies like Daniel and the soldiers by her side, she finally felt that there was hope. Real hope. The journey back to the base was quiet, the tension of battle slowly ebbing away into the cool night air. The once raging storm of conflict had faded, leaving behind the quiet hum of military vehicles and the soft crunch of boots on the dirt path. The world around them seemed suspended in time, a stillness that seemed to amplify every step Valeri took. The distant stars twinkled faintly overhead, but their light was barely enough to pierce the thick canopy of clouds that had gathered above. Valeri walked alongside Daniel, her sharp eyes scanning the surroundings with a practiced vigilance. The earth beneath their feet felt solid, unyielding, but her thoughts were far from steady. The battle had been fierce, the creatures relentless, but what weighed on her now was something different, something deeper. She had never thought she would be walking alongside a human, not as an ally, not as a partner. Her people had always viewed humans as weak, primitive. Yet, standing beside Daniel now, after everything they had endured, Valeri felt an unspoken bond beginning to form. It was subtle at first, a mere flicker in the back of her mind, but as the hours passed, it grew stronger. It was trust, a kind of trust she never thought she would allow herself to feel. The lights from the base illuminated the path ahead, casting long, jagged shadows on the ground. The base itself loomed in the distance, a stark contrast to the wilderness that surrounded it. Soldiers moved about, tending to equipment, but Valeri's gaze was drawn to the horizon, to the vastness beyond. It felt endless, just like the weight of her responsibility. "Valeri," her voice low but steady, breaking the silence between them. "You said we're in this together. I think I'm starting to believe you." Her words hung in the air, and for the first time since she had arrived on this planet, she felt something she hadn't expected, something akin to hope. Daniel had kept his word, stayed by her side when others would have turned away. The unspoken trust between them had solidified in the heat of battle. It wasn't something she could easily explain, but it was real. She no longer felt alone. Daniel's footsteps slowed beside her, and he glanced at her, his expression calm, but there was a warmth in his eyes that hadn't been there before. It was subtle, yet it spoke volumes, a quiet acknowledgement of the shared journey that lay ahead. "Daniel," his voice firm but reassuring. "Together, Valeri. We'll figure it out." His words were simple, yet they carried weight. There was no pretense in his tone, no hidden agenda, only the promise of partnership. Valeri met his gaze, her sharp eyes softened, her guard lower than it had ever been. For once, she allowed herself to believe in the possibility of something beyond survival, something greater than the bloodshed and the endless wars her people had endured. The first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, spilling across the landscape in soft, golden hues. The sky, once dark and brooding, was now painted with shades of purple and pink, the colors of a new day beginning to unfold. The sun's light bathed the land in a gentle glow, transforming the rugged terrain into something almost ethereal, as if the earth itself had been reborn. Valeri stood beside Daniel, her silhouette framed by the early morning light. The air was cool, crisp, carrying the scent of fresh grass and the earth's quiet promise of renewal. The noise of the base had faded, leaving only the whisper of the wind and the distant rustle of leaves. The quiet was comforting, like the calm after a storm. She stood there, her gaze fixed on the horizon, her thoughts far from the chaos of the battle. Her mind was filled with 1,000 possibilities, and yet, for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel overwhelmed by them. There was a sense of purpose growing inside her, one that she hadn't realized she'd lost until now. The survival of her people was still uncertain, but now there was something else: hope. The weight of the High Council's decree, the pressure of her people's future, still loomed over her, but it no longer felt like an insurmountable burden. With Daniel at her side, she knew she didn't have to bear it alone. For the first time, she felt like there was a way forward, a way to reshape her people's fate without sacrificing everything she held dear. "Valeri," softly, her voice filled with quiet reflection. "I don't know what the future holds. But for the first time, I don't feel alone." The words felt strange on her tongue, almost foreign. She had always believed that strength came from independence, from standing alone and fighting with everything she had. But now, standing here with Daniel, she realized that maybe true strength came from something else. From the connections they forged, the trust they built, and the belief that they could face whatever came together. Daniel glanced at her, his expression softening as he watched the sunrise, the warmth of the moment settling around them like a blanket. His eyes, dark and steady, held a quiet understanding, one that Valeri didn't have to explain. "Daniel," his voice steady, yet full of warmth. "You don't have to be." The simplicity of his words echoed in the stillness of the morning. It wasn't just a reassurance, it was a promise. He wasn't just here to fight beside her. He was here to stay. The bond between them had grown stronger, forged in the fires of battle, but now, it was something more. It was a connection built on respect, trust, and a shared desire to create a future, not just survive one. As the camera pulled back, the vast landscape stretched out before them, a sprawling canvas of mountains, forests, and the promise of new horizons. The camera lingered on the two of them, Valeri, standing tall beside Daniel, both gazing at the endless possibilities ahead. The world around them was vast, the challenges ahead uncertain, but for the first time, neither of them seemed daunted. They were ready. And together, they would face whatever came next. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey through the universe of HFY Sci-Fi Love and War Story. If you enjoyed the adventure, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more thrilling tales of bravery, love, and the mysteries of the galaxy. Together, we'll continue to explore the unknown, uncover secrets, and witness the power of unity and survival. Stay tuned for more stories that will challenge everything you thought you knew about the universe. Until next time, keep your heart open and your mind curious.